another session. We're going to go a little bit more in deep in the discussion of the BTRs. And then, of course, we will have the opportunity to questions and answer from you all. And we want to finish with a very quick survey that you can do through Mentimeter. Okay? So let's start so we are able to keep things on time. So first thing, the opening remarks. Again, since we don't have the SBI chair with us, I'm going to invite Don Cooper to start. Please, Don, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. Miriam, Nabil, in absentia. It is one of those events where there's been a change in how the parties decided to do things. During the negotiations to conclude the compliance committee, the parties made a conscious decision to remove punitive activities from the compliance committee and make them all facilitative. In other words, if assistance is required, if that leads to something not being done, then the compliance committee looks for ways to help you to get them done. Rather than telling you you are being naughty or bad because you did not get them done. A conscious change by parties in the approach that you were taking. This follows along the lines that you did with your NDCs and your BTRs, where instead of having something imposed on you, your share of the burden, or here are your commitments that you have to deliver, you switch that to tell each party, establish which share you think you can contribute to the whole. What are the priorities for you? And those become the commitments that you take on, the ones that you develop for yourself. That's a complete change. It relies on the fact that in the creation of the INDCs, the forerunner to the NDCs, where this process was tested, it proved far more effective than having imposed shares of the burden. And that has continued to be the case year after year after year, and reinforced in each of the activities that you, the parties, have taken. So clearly it is working. Our issue is not that it doesn't work, but that we are not taking on enough of the burden. So in preparing the next NDCs, we need to bend that curve even more than we have done so. We are in the mid 2 point something or the other, 4, 5, 6 degrees by the end of the century. And we need to get that down below 1.5. It is not to imply that we've had no effect. Remember, it was over 3. However, if you look at the impact of our current 1.1 or 1.2 degree world, it's not so nice when it comes to natural disasters. So when we get to 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, it really will is in being more cautious. You are trying to ensure fairness, and also that advantage is gained to your citizens, whether they are individual people or corporate citizens or NGO citizens, whichever type of citizen or stakeholder is in your country. For many who are larger emitters, the country tends to go slower than its industry or major companies. Oftentimes, global leaders in any particular field want the world to move faster in that direction because they're a global leader. In many larger developing countries, they have key industries who are also world leaders in climate-friendly technology. Many developed countries are also in that position. So we ask you to have that dialogue with your constituents to ensure that you are reaching the maximum possible ambition in keeping emissions down. And on the reverse side, where many developing countries have an even bigger advantage in maximizing your absorptive capacity of your sinks. Whether they're your shallow reef systems, sea grasses, which are hugely absorptive, by the way, and your forests and greenlands. And not because you are doing it to save the world. You might want to press Guyana on this. They're a very good example. You are doing it because it's worth hundreds of millions of US dollars to you every year. And Guyana has put a preservation order and indexed its entire forest in the country. And every year, the Minister of Finance puts down, I don't know, 400, 500 million US dollars as revenue from that. Your countries can also do the same. So there are reasons that are nationally beneficial for going in certain directions, not for going what others have done, simply taking a better path. So when you have discussions, if you ever reach that stage, take 3 or 4 years to ever get there, when you are engaged with the compliance committee on your implementation, and they come to make suggestions to you, ensure that they are also being as ambitious as possible with their suggestions. So I'd like to close by reminding you all that the biennial transparency reports are to be submitted this year. And as you heard from our COP president-designate this morning, they would like for you to complete them before the COP because they want to have this huge, no, I shouldn't qualify. They want to have this extra special celebration for all BTR submitters at the COP. I don't know what it is. I just happen to know it's going to be fantastic. Almost makes me wish I was a country again. But anyway, it is, so please try and complete your BTRs by then. If you need any assistance whatsoever as an individual country, group of countries, please contact the Secretariat and we will ensure that it happens, even if we have to come down and spend a week with you. So, you know, Mauritius and Seychelles and Kenya, Singapore, please call us so that we can enjoy the time of helping you. And we will certainly make the effort and be there. There are loads of partners who want to work with you. Believe me, they're learning as much as you are because they're also producing their BTRs for the first time. And all those people who are providing the assistance are providing the assistance for the first time. And we encourage you to look at your first one as just draw the line. That's where we start. Some people start up there, some over there, some start over in Frankfurt, but you all start somewhere else. And then you take the first step from there. And we don't expect people to start showing fantastic ones, so I'm sure some countries will do that, until you get to the second one, realistically more the third or the fourth one. And you have all that flexibility built in. You don't have that bit. Exercise your flexibility and say you will get it within the next 10 years. Oh, and by the way, you need $1 million. You're supposed to say what you need in order to be able to get there. So take advantage of what you negotiated. You guys were absolutely brilliant when you put the transparency package in place. The ETF is amazing. So use the thing that you all agreed was perfect for where you go from here. And keep in mind, the BTRs measure how you are progressing in your NDC, but it is not linked to your country so much as it is linked to how all of us are doing. Everybody submits at the same time. Right? If you make a decision that we all send it in at the same time, what you are measuring is where we all are, not where you are. It is where we all are. And in 2 years' time, you do it again. Where are we? So the key is that. It means when you submit your BTR, make it your best effort of where you are and not your best effort at how good a consultant you could buy to produce data for you. I'm sorry for all the consultants in the room. I didn't mean to take bread out of your mouths, but we want to see the parties say, I don't have that, rather than hire a consultant to go and make it up and slot it in there, and it has no relevance. It means that you're not reflecting where the world is at that time. So with that, I hand back to you, Marcelo, and I am looking forward to all of the interesting dialogue we're going to have today, and to see how the new Compliance Committee on Implementation, or the Implementation Committee on Compliance, is going to indicate their way forward with you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Don. Definitely the CGE is also here to help the parties that wish to submit the first BTR this year. So we will assist you as much as we can. Miriam, please talk a little bit closer to the microphone. I'm not sure if people in the back are hearing well. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Marcelo. Good afternoon, everyone. I would just like to know how many of our CGE colleagues are here. Welcome. I am speaking today as a member of the CGE, and thank you for inviting me to do the welcoming remarks on behalf of all this fantastic team. I am Miriam Inostroza. Worldwide, I'm known as Miriam Inostroza, but in Brazil, I'm Miriam Suarez. We don't want to explain why, but that's why Marcelo presented me as Miriam Suarez. Some colleagues may have asked who that is. Anyways, welcome. I would like to tell you more about the CGE. Thanks, Don, for setting the scene. This is an interesting event where we will be having the BTR dialogue with a consultative group of experts, or CGE, as known by many of you, and the PAICC. It might be a new acronym for many of you. It is the Paris Agreement Implementation and Compliance Committee. So for us, it is an honor to have you all. Just now, Don was complaining, complaining, but observing that differently to other transparency events we already had, this is not really fully packed, but you see, we have an acceptable audience. So I want to extend again my gratitude to Don for setting beautifully the scene with those positive remarks, and also reminding countries on the challenges to still go through this year until hopefully many countries submit the BTR. So I hear in these discussions also, is it about numbers or is it about quality? So I think from these negotiations, we will go back home with the sentiment that we have an obligation with our different responsibilities. From our side, I think the CGE responsibility is to continue supporting you. Your responsibility is to work on the BTR and perhaps the NDCs as well. So those consultants providing support, everybody has a responsibility here. Also, thank you very much to the Secretariat for providing continuously the support to the CGE. It's been instrumental in our work and to comply with our mandates, bringing you capacity building. And speaking on capacity building, the CGE has been there since 1999. And through different, programs and efforts have been supporting countries since it was created. Actually, this year, last year, the celebration for the 25th anniversary already with several events, obviously appreciating those efforts along these years. And actually in the COP, there was a very nice celebration where all CGE members were appreciated with diplomas. So that was a very nice symbolic gesture on that. So I wanted to reflect a little bit on the fact of capacity building. It's not a fact, but a process, let's say. I think almost all in this room work on that, but we have little reflection on what that actually means. And especially for climate transparency. It is not an impossible mission, but actually it is very, very difficult and almost never-ending story, the capacity building. Because once you have solved one issue with our capacity building efforts or your own, there is something else emerging. So there is always room not only for the CGE and other capacity building providers, but also for the consultants here. There is a way to go still. I think, as Don said, we are initiating a new phase in reporting where countries are implementing and strengthening the modalities, procedures, and guidelines of the enhanced transparency framework, which are very stringent, as you know, and they are provided the flexibility principle. You all have to report on all gases, and you have to put forward many other requirements of the MPGs. And again, the CGE, together with other parts of the constituencies, are there to support you. So we talk about a lot about institutional setting up as well. Previously, we were listening from colleagues speaking on NDC cycle. I mean, the process of NDC cycle and how important the institutional setup is. But sometimes we have to reflect that institutional arrangements is not something isolated for transparency, isolated for NDCs, or many other policy processes in countries, for the NAPs, for the LTLETs. Think on institutional arrangements in a more integrated way. So that's another thing we have been promoting through our different activities. So in a nutshell, let's say the process of developing capacities for transparency is meant to reduce the reliance on external assistance. And I'm echoing here, Don, not to scare, obviously, our consultants with whose work we wouldn't do the work we need to do in the countries. So that was some capacity building. I want to go now to acknowledge also the work of the CGE. In just the past 2 years alone, the CGE has organized an impressive 18 events, collecting experts or training experts, and the numbers are high. We've reached out to 1,300 transparency experts. And as highlighted by Don, you know, this year marks a critical milestone. Again, you have to submit these BTRs. And on this, the CGE has intensified its support to you all, focusing on the use of the enhanced transparency framework reporting tools. So the efforts by the CGE also emphasize promoting peer learning and review processes to facilitate the preparation of and submissions of the BTRs. So we always appreciate also the South-South collaboration, and which is very much also promoted by the CGE, and we tend to align these processes also through other support. So as a testament of these efforts is the recent regional workshop for Africa held in May in Victoria Falls, Zimbabwe. This was attended by 48 participants from 35 countries, which is also, again, an impressive number. It is an example of the commitment and the hands-on support and regional collaboration. Participants engaged in comprehensive sessions designed to equip them with the necessary skills and knowledge to effectively prepare the BTRs. And this was not the only one. The teams are already also organizing and starting to roll out other activities. So I would like to acknowledge the presence of PAICC, not personally, but we have Christina online. She's been instrumental, of course, on having this process rolling. Her insights and guidance have been instrumental in aligning our efforts with overarching goals of the Paris Agreement. And again, these efforts are come to this idea of aligning everything in a country. So relating your processes to other processes with a hope that costs will be reduced and processes will be highlighted. Your participation and engagement are crucial. So please provide your questions in the questions and answers segment, and I really appreciate your presence and thank you very much for being here, and I hope we have a very interesting and fulfilling discussions going on. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam. We are a little bit behind the time, so we're going to jump directly to the presentations. You are welcome to stay with us or maybe take the seat so you can see also the presentation. So please feel free to sit on another place. So we will start with the presentation by another friend of mine and colleague of the CGE, Ihab. So please, can you join us here, and you can also introduce yourself and give the presentation for the audience. Yeah, and maybe my other colleagues, if you want to join us, Rapida, if you want to join us, or you can stay there to see the presentation as you wish. Okay. 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 Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Marcelo, and good afternoon, esteemed colleagues. My name is Riham Ahmed Hassan. I'm from Sudan, and I would like to thank the Secretariat for giving me this opportunity to present on this very interesting event. I was privileged to be a member of the CGE for 2 consecutive terms, from 2017 to 2020, and now I'm honorable to be a CGE member for 2 years. And today I'm going to present to you the 25 years of support of the CGE. The consultative group of experts, as Miriam was saying, was established in 1999 under the convention and continue to operate under Paris Agreement. The specific objectives of the CGE is to provide technical support and advice to developing countries to enhance their national and institutional capacities needed to prepare the national communication, BUR, BTR, and GHG inventory reports as well. Second, to prioritize its work to address the gaps, the challenges, the needs, and constraints that have been encountered by developing countries while preparing their transparency-related reports. Over the years, the CGE has had almost 152 members who have been driving the work of the CGE and ensuring successful deliver on its mandate. The photo below was taken during the 11th CGE meeting, which took place 5 to 7 February this year. And all the members were very happy. So next slide, please. So The CGE work articulates around 4 key activity areas: the capacity building needs assessment, knowledge product, knowledge delivery, collaboration, and engagement. So the CGE provide targeted support that fits for the purpose, which is addressing the challenges and needs, as well as supporting for preparation of the reports. Next. Well, it's not easy to give brief about the achievement of the CGE. However, I will be highlighting below some of the key achievement of the CGE during the 25 years of intensive work. Regarding the technical material, annually the CGE prepared capacity building needs assessment reports. They also produced a very valuable and important reports and handbooks, such as technical handbook on MRV, the CGE toolbox on institutional arrangement, the ETF technical handbook. The CGE also had prepared training material on adaptation, mitigation, and NDCs as well. Regarding the workshops and training, the CGE had conducted more than 90 CGE regional workshops with participants of much more than 3,000 national experts. They also conduct more than 45 webinars with the involvement of more than 2,400 national experts. Also, they conducted 16 rounds of training for technical team of experts, as well as electronic learning courses, which witnessed by the visit of more than 300 experts. In terms of collaboration and outreach, the CGE continue its collaboration and outreach. They organize side events during the SP session and during the COP. Also, since 2019, the CGE organized the informal forum and continue to be organized annually. The CGE collaborate with international organization, intergovernmental organization, expert bodies, and constituted bodies under the Convention and Paris Agreement as well, to see the synergies, the potential synergies on planning for capacity building activities for developing countries. Also, the CGE established its webpage and MRV help desk. They also create a Facebook and LinkedIn account. Next, please. Yeah, in 2020, the CGE developed its vision, mission, and metrics needed to measure the progress of its work. It also developed strategic priorities for 2020-2024 and keeps updating them every now and then. And taking into account the MRV evolution under the Convention and ETF evolution under Paris Agreement, the strategic priorities of the CGE for 2024 to 2026 will be gathering lesson learned and good practices in relation to submitted BTRs. Also try to understand the area of improvement that had been identified by the developing countries, and refine the approaches and tools used to provide technical advice and support. And finally, to continue facilitating implementation of the ETF, including for the preparation and timely submission of their BTRs and national communication, and facilitate improved reporting over time. Next, please. Yeah, that was my final slide. And I will end my presentation by saying that the CGE is the only constituted body that provides technical advice and support for MRV reporting, and will continue to be the main body to support developing countries for transparency. And please scan this QR code to provide your feedback on the CGE technical materials. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you. We're going to have the opportunity of questions and answers after all the presentation. So I'm going to move for the second one that will be given by Adipa. Please, you can introduce yourself and follow with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pradeep Bolnot, and I'm the national focal point for the UNFCCC for Guyana, and also the Senior Director for Climate and REDD+ within Guyana's Ministry of Natural Resources. It's such a pleasure to be here this afternoon with fellow colleagues in the room from countries, also experts through the CGE as well as PAICC, and other colleagues from the UNFCCC to share the Guyana experience on some of the things we had to consider as we drafted the biennial transparency report. What were some of the lessons learned? What were some of the challenges we faced? How we overcame some of those challenges, and to date, some of the issues that we still experience. And perhaps with a singular motivation of encouraging other countries to also make submissions. And at the end of my presentation, hopefully there will be this extra motivation that the path is not uniform or consistent for any single country, but it's possible for any country. But allow me to start first, please. The next slide. So, you know, in many ways, when we started in Guyana to think about what needed to be done for the BTR, our reality was that we never submitted a BUR before. We didn't submit a biennial update report in any way, shape, or form from the country position. We were at a situation whereby our national communication was several years outdated. We hadn't submitted a national adaptation plan either. And what we had within our arsenal in terms of technical documentation were our reference level documents, which were submitted, and Guyana being a forest country, we had several years of experience formulating MRV systems, reporting on Cancun safeguards, submitting summary of information reports, and that more forestry-oriented body of work within our greenhouse gas inventory areas of program. So there were several gaps that we had, you know, no BUR, several years outdated in terms of our national communication, no NAP either. So we started to look at what we do have. So what we found out, you know, we have our reference level. We've done a whole lot of work on forestry and on MRV systems. And we now have within our program in Guyana at the institutional level, significant progress on the NDCs. And we found that these bits form the center of our solution in coming together with what would be the BTR. Next slide, please. And the next one. So a lot of what we had to consider were, what are the essential elements of what should form our BTR? And what are those advisory elements that we could include, but were not absolutely necessary? So we looked at this diagram, which was really a very good starting point for decision-making for Guyana. What were absolutely necessary, what we needed to have in place, and what are those elements that would be great, but not absolutely necessary. So the greenhouse gas inventory, without question, that needed to come together for all sectors. Our reality in Guyana was that we have really strong reporting capacities within our forestry sector and our energy sector, and not so great capacities in terms of institutional strength for the other areas of greenhouse gas reporting. So we realized that we were really strong in some sectors, and some sectors needed more help. So that was a reality check for us, that we had to work with a system that wasn't uniform, but that information could be gathered in a way to make use of high capacity sectors, whilst bringing along sectors which didn't have the level of capacity, like energy and forestry, as was our experience in Guyana. What we found really helped us was that at the time of tabling our NDC and the years that followed after 2016, there have been a lot of institutionalizing of those NDC programs within the agencies at governmental level, but also within private sector. And though we hadn't submitted a BUR, or we were several years outdated in our national communication, the fact that these NDC programs were institutionalized kind of in a way bridged that gap,
between, that time of not really keeping up with some of these UNFCCC submissions, but then, picking up pace with the NDC. And I think the ETF really did that in a very admirable and helpful way for countries like Guyana. It created a track that was more, in many ways, easier for countries to follow from the developing countries' perspective. Because we, for the first time, were in the driver's seat. We could steer that ship in a way that made sense for our country scenario. We're strong in some ways, we're not strong in some ways, but we felt we were in the driver's seat. And that really was meaningful for us because we felt ownership of the process. And because of that, the NDC programs which we institutionalized ended up being the driving force behind the BTR compilation. And of course, we are aware that areas like tracking the specific indicators, ideally we should have this fantastic performance-based indicator system where everything has KPIs and they're tracked monthly and then quarterly, fitting into annual reporting. We didn't have that, but we have a vision for that. So what we attempted to do was to build on the areas that we do have. Forestry and energy were our early starters, and we have a plan on how to do that for the other sectors. So we have a fantastic vision, but only part of that vision realized as of now. But we have a way to get to that vision as we move to our second BTR and our third BTR down the line. And one of the areas that we do have a good vision for as well is in projections. So we have good baseline data for some of the sectors like forestry and energy, for which projections are made easy because we can clearly see what will happen in 3, 5, and 10 years down the line for those sectors. We don't have such a scientifically robust package for the other sectors, but we do have a plan to get there. So what we've done in our BTR is to present that within our NDC reporting section, and within our flexibility section, we are clear that we recognize these are gaps and we have a plan to fill those gaps. Next slide, please. So I won't go into too much details on this slide, but just to make the points that what we also found was really helpful for Guyana was to see how these three processes converge. The biennial transparency reporting, what we are doing on our national communication. We are currently at our third national communication, and what the BUR would have led us to. And if you look on the screen, you will see that the BTR isn't really at all creating something new or additional. What it is doing is taking parts of what really would be country reporting and creating a route whereby the country would lead, retrofit, and customize for its purpose. So unlike the national communication, which is great, and the BTRs and all of the other tracks of reporting, the BTR really hones in on what the country could deliver right away and to create its own path of achieving what it has not delivered as yet. Next slide, please. And what was valuable for Guyana as well is to really embed ownership of BTR elements within national strategy, because otherwise there wouldn't be the kind of ownership at the governmental level, at the higher governmental level, that really is necessary to get the process going and continues to keep going. So what we've done in Guyana is to make the BTR reporting and other aspects of UNFCCC reporting, though they're requirements and advisory submissions for developing countries, we made them national commitments within our strategy. And because of that, we've been able to align BTR reporting with everything else UNFCCC oriented, safeguards reporting, FREL reporting, MRV reporting. Next slide, please. And this really is my last slide to share with you, though I've shared some of the pains already, but to give you hope that we've been able to overcome many of these. So some of the challenges, as I mentioned, were that the sectors were all at different places. There were some that were about 14 years advanced in terms of the work that was being done. Forestry, the forestry sector was one of these. Energy sector was quite advanced, but some of the other sectors were not. So we had to create a way to use country level emission factors for some, IPCC default factors for some. But the ETF is so geared in that it allows for all sectors, despite where you're at, to be able to come together in a singular reporting. In terms of lessons learned, we encourage countries to really make use of the flexibility provisions that are part of the ETF. The ETF has no unrealistic expectations that all sectors should be at the same level, or all countries should be at the same level, or that developed and developing countries should be at the same level. It creates a framework that is flexible and adaptive based on wherever you are on that curve. And we encourage countries to make use of that flexibility. And we would draw your attention to that section within our BTR that we wrote up on flexibility. We said, we don't have all the projections. Some of the sectors had to use default factors. We recognize these gaps and we plan to build on them and to fill those gaps as we move along to our second and third BTR. And on the recommendations, so that in some way, shape, or form is a recommendation. We also recommend that the NDCs continue to sit at the center of everything that is oriented towards our submission of biennial reporting. They're really the driving force behind everything that is done, because the reporting is about the NDC progress and how that is coming along. So by itself, the BTR isn't the outcome. The progress on the NDC is the outcome. So that is what we have tried to internalize in Guyana. Having, being the first developing country to submit the BTR, that isn't, we're happy about it, but that isn't the main achievement for us. The fact that we've advanced in some key NDC commitments within the forest sector, within the energy sector, that is more meaningful, because that is what is connected to the climate ambition, not the fact that we've submitted a report that is now on the UNFCCC website. And I'll end by sharing with you what's next for us. So Guyana is now preparing to do its in-country review, which will take place in the first week of October. And now we will see the second sphere of what the ETF is about. The sphere that has to do with the experts coming in, spending about a week in Guyana, looking over our systems, speaking to the institutions that compile those reporting, and getting an in-country feel on how the NDC reporting connects to our transparency reporting under the BTR. So all roads lead now to our in-country review, which will take place in the first week of October. And hopefully at the next COP, I'll be able to bring experiences from that in-country review. Apologies for taking up more of my time. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's continue with the presentations, and then, as I said, we're going to have the opportunity to make questions to the panelists. So now we have Christina. Christina, we have her online. So can you hear us, Christina, please?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, maybe if you can speak a little bit louder.
I can try.
Yes, perfect. Okay, and you can see the PowerPoint presentation, so let me know when I should move the slides, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you, Marcelo, and very warm hello to Bonn. I do apologize for not being there in person. I wish I could have been with you. I would like to start with expressing the gratitude on behalf of the Paris Agreement and Compliance Committee, PAICC, to the CGE, as well as the UNFCCC Secretariat for organizing this event, but also many other events that we've had throughout the year, also already last year, where we tried to explain to parties how the transparency framework and the role and mandate of PAICC live together. And in my brief presentation here, I will try to give a brief introduction to what PAICC is, what PAICC's role and function are. As Marcelo said, my name is Christina. I'm the co-chair of the Paris Agreement Implementation Compliance Committee together with Hasib Gohar from Pakistan. I am from Norway. Next slide. The Paris Agreement Implementation and Compliance Committee itself was already included and established in the Paris Agreement in Article 15, and its purpose is to facilitate the implementation of and promote compliance with the provisions of the Paris Agreement. Here we talk about individual implementation and compliance by each party to the agreement. Of course, the overall aim is, by having agreed on that implementation and compliance body, to enhance the effectiveness of the agreement's implementation and compliance, but also to ensure accountability of parties. But the whole idea of having PAICC included in the Paris Agreement was to enhance mutual trust and confidence. The Compliance Committee is expert-based. We have 12 members and alternates, so that people in the committee. It is facilitative in nature, meaning it is supposed to help and support parties to apply their commitments under the agreement. It is transparent, or is supposed to work in a transparent manner, non-adversarial. It is not punitive. It cannot put out any sanctions, and it is not a dispute settlement mechanism. Next slide, please. Very important question is, of course, when does the committee, right? How does an issue get to the committee in order for the committee to become active? And there are basically three different modalities. One is that a party at any time can make a submission to the committee with respect to its own challenges with respect to implementation and or compliance. This is defined in the modalities and procedures for the committee, which are part of the whole package of decisions that was adopted in Katowice 18, Decision 20 CM. Next slide, please. The most important aspect, of course, of the committee is that it can also become active on its own without a party coming to the committee. And that is very clearly defined with respect to a number of very particular situations. Specific mandatory requirements that are not fulfilled by a party will enable the committee to be active or to consider issues. I included that particular provision from its modalities and procedures on the next slide, so that you can see how parties agreed when the committee will initiate consideration. And you see here on this slide 4 different modalities, different situations. First of all, the committee will consider the situation where a party has not communicated. And second, and that is very relevant to our discussion here with respect to the committee. Second, little Roman 2, you see that the committee will initiate the consideration of issues where a party has not submitted mandatory report or communication of information under Article 3. And the important element here is that it's not necessarily that the committee just looks at whether there is or is not a BTR, but the committee will have to look whether the elements that are listed in Article 13, paragraph 7, A and B are in place for developing countries, that is the National Inventory Report, and the information on the progress of implementation and compliance in developing countries. And as we know, developed countries have additional requirements with respect to information about the means. You see also that the participation at the Facilitative Multilateral Consultative, the FMC, is a legal requirement, which, if it doesn't happen, will lead the committee issues. And then finally, for developed country parties, the information under Article. Next slide, please. And the third way of how the committee will become active is with the consent of the party concerned in situations where the technical expert view report, and just heard Guyana talking about the next step that now follows after the BTR submission. If the technical expert review report indicates to the committee that there may be issues of significant and persistent inconsistencies, that is something the committee itself will have to determine, then the committee, with the consent of the party concerned, may initiate. But persistent issues may indicate that this is something that may require a number of BTRs before. Next slide, please. So these were the three modalities under which the committee will become active. And next question is, of course, what can the committee do if it The committee is required to take appropriate measures, shall take appropriate measures, and it has received a whole toolbox of issues of measures that the committee consider taking. The first one is always that the committee will engage in a direct dialogue with the party concerned and try to figure out in that dialogue what is the issue, what are the challenges, how can we help, how can we facilitate and promote implementation. But the committee can do more. It can also assist any party concerned in its engagement with support bodies under the parent and make recommendations to the party, and if the party so wishes, can also convey those recommendations to the respective support under the pairs. Third, the committee may recommend to the party concerned to develop an action plan of how to get back into compliance. And as a fourth element, and it's kind of a last resort, the committee can issue. Next slide, please. The committee has also a second, if I can say, function according to what the CMA decided the committee should do. If the committee in its work experiences that there are actually quite a number of parties that are experiencing the same challenge, that may indicate that it's not an individual challenge only, but it may be a challenge of a systemic nature. Maybe there's something not quite fitting in the rules. Maybe the deadline is too short. Maybe the rules are not clear. It's a systemic issue. And if that's the case, this is something that the committee can bring to the attention of the CMA, including also recommendations to the CMA of how to address this issue. On the other hand, the CMA may also bring the attention of the committee. But I thought it would be very helpful to know for the audience that this is another function of the committee to indicate issues of a systemic character and not with respect to individuals. Next slide, which I think is my last slide. What is next now? As we all heard from Don early on, and everyone is aware of it, this is an important year with the submission of the BTRs due in December this year, but also next. This is something that the committee keeps a very close eye on. The deadline for the BTRs at the end of this year, I already mentioned the mandatory elements that need to be in place, but also by the time the committee meets again next year, the deadline for the NDCs will have passed, which is February 2025, as well as the deadline for the communication of Article 9.5 information for developed countries. So the committee is kind of a guardian of these deadlines, and you will see this if you go to the UNFCCC website. As of today, there is a news item on the main website which talks about our last meeting, which was about a month ago in Bonn, where the committee discussed what its next steps are and where it highlighted to the parties information, the importance of the deadline. This year, next, are coming closer. And with that, I close and go back to you, Marcelo, and I'm looking for questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Christina. I was consulting the Secretariat, since we are a little bit behind. The idea that we could have the panel discussion with the questions that you see here in the screen, but I want to maybe do a little bit different. I would like to invite my colleagues to be here with us, including my colleague from the CGE, Facel, if you are able to join us. Yes, please join us here in the podium. And then, I mean, the questions are here. You are happy or invite to respond to that. But before that, maybe I would like us also to open the questions to the public, so we can combine both the questions from the public and the questions that we see here in the screen. Otherwise, if we go to all these questions, it may end up without not time enough for questions from the public here. So please, the floor is open. Yes, we have one person there. Somebody will give you the mic. So we will collect a couple of questions, then I invite my colleagues to respond. And if you want also to touch base on all the questions that we have in the screen, feel free to do so. Please introduce yourself, please.
Ruth Spencer. I'm a local community representative from Antigua and Barbuda. My question is to my sister from Guyana. I know in the forest live a lot of indigenous people, and I wanted to know if your report had that effective stakeholder engagement, that they were able to contribute their knowledge to the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's have one or two questions more. I think there was one here in the front, Tugba.
Thank you. Edalmi Pinello from Belize. I would like to congratulate Guyana for its submissions on the BTR. That question is for Guyana. Can you touch base on the flexibility that Guyana used in their BTR, particular in the NDC and inventory sections? Also, I understood that you utilize in-country capacity and expertise to complete the BTR. I would want to ask, at any point throughout the process, were there gaps and challenges that require you to access external capacity and technical support available for supportive providers, such as the Secretariat? And lastly, you mentioned that the process improved in your Article 6 reporting. Can you extend on that a bit? Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see more hands at this point in time, so I'm going to give the opportunity to responses. And since we have two persons here that has not yet the chance to speak, I will start with them, Sin and Sadiq. You can go, both of you can go first, and then of course we have some questions from Guyana también. So please, Sin, if you want to touch base on one of the questions that you have here or any comments from what you have heard up to now, feel free to do so. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Marcelo. And I must say, I'm really inspired by Guyana's experience, and it was really comprehensive, and very impressed. Well, I actually prepared a few quick points to share. I think in terms of as advice to developing countries in terms of preparation and submission of BTRs. So, I mean, from Singapore's perspective, we've submitted 5 BURs. We've also just underwent the FSV for our 5th BUR, and we are working to submit our first BTR by end of this year. And we've also been, working with the US and the Secretariat in terms of organizing ETF workshops to really build capacity. And for the last workshop that we organized in March this year, we were very happy to hear that all of the 21 countries, all of them, except one LDC, all of them said that they are working towards submitting their BTRs on time. So that's really very encouraging. So let me just round off by giving 4 key points or 4 suggestions for developing countries when you are thinking about your BTRs, right? So the first piece of advice is don't be late, right? The deadline is 31st December. Unless you're a small island developing state or LDC, which you have more, discretion for, please submit them on time. This is a shell provision, and I think Christina has already talked about it, so I won't belabor the point. But the key thing is really for the enhanced transparency framework is really the backbone of the entire Paris Agreement. It holds everything together, whether it's from the NDCs, the finance, adaptation, everything. So, it's really important that all countries submit on time. Right? And if that's not sufficient motivation, there's the reputational risk of being flagged for not submitting on time and essentially for non-compliance. But I also wanted to touch on the fact that, when we've talked to some developing countries, some have been asking, I've been working on my BUR for some time. Shall I submit my my BUR by this year, as a stopgap measure, right? And then think about submitting my BTR maybe, sometime later. And other parties may also be wondering, why don't I delay my BTR submission by half a year or a year so that I can prepare even better quality BTR than what I can do now? So, having spoken to many colleagues and the SB chairs and the COP presidency, I think the key message to all of us should be that focus on getting your BTR in by the deadline, ideally before COP 29. Everything that you need to do has already been put in place. Now, if you have already received funding for your BUR, talk to the JEF. It is possible to find a solution to reformat your BUR to a BTR so that you can meet the BTR deadline, right? So, so I think that's something that I would like to encourage all of us to do. Yeah, and there's also no rule that states that you cannot resubmit an improved BTR after you have met the deadline. So the encouragement is please meet the deadline, and you can still tweak it, as you go along. My second point, and to the, this is a very quick one. Don't try and get a perfect BTR at the first attempt. Right? Even developed countries took many years to perfect their inventory and to get their transparency reporting done properly. Just do your best effort, apply flexibility where you need to, and improve over successive BTR submissions. There is no award or prize for submitting the best BTR, but there is the issue of being non-compliant if you miss the deadline, right? So I'll move on to the third point. And if you need to make use of flexibility provisions, don't be shy. Just state what flexibility you require, how long you need it, and to just submit your BTR, right? Developing countries have the right to self-determine which flexibilities to apply in the light of their capabilities. And for my final point, help is available. Just call a friend, right? The UNFCCC will be happy to address any of your questions, as well as the CGE. There's the PAICC, which is the Partnership for Transparency for Paris Agreement, FAO, IGIS, UNDP, UNEP, GGGI, CBIT. So these are all various mechanisms and schemes who can provide that kind of support that you require. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Please, Sadiq, if you want to go first before we have the...
No, thank you, Marcelo. Actually, my colleague from Singapore already said about the BTR and all other issues. Actually, just I add one point. Actually, we have some kind of reporting system before. For example, national communication, BOR, and we submitted NDC, NAP like that. But BTR is something different. It particularly highlighted the transparency issues of Paris Agreement. And I am representing LDC group, although there is some flexibility for LDC group on BTR, but we are preparing, as Bangladesh, we are preparing for that. And we are easily getting support from the GF to prepare that. I think the backbone of Paris Agreement is the transparency, particularly on NDC mitigation and finance. I think my colleague already identified one very important point. Don't try to make it totally perfect in the first instance. Actually, this is the first one and some challenges over there. But if we can submit it within the timeline, I think the timing is coming so that in the next we can be more perfect. And from CGE side, we have some documents, already some international institutions, for example, UNDP, UNEP, and IJS and others are particularly helping us to prepare our documents. I think it is possible to get support for other countries from this institution. I think this might be a breakthrough for all countries, developing all countries, to make our actions carry forward in a transparent manner. Thank you all.
Thank you. So, Pradeepa, you please can respond to the questions that were made directly to your experience with the BTR.
Sure. Thank you very much for the questions. Maybe I can start with the first one first on the inclusion of indigenous peoples in Guyana, or indigenous peoples who are called Amerindians. Just to give you a sense of the importance, and I appreciate that question because it gives me a chance to share with you how the dynamics really are oriented in Guyana. 15% of all forests, of all land in Guyana, about 12.3% of forests are owned and managed by indigenous peoples. So it's a really relevant issue to contextualize as we draft any UNFCCC document or implement any NDC program. Specifically to the question you raised, what was our approach to including in a consultative and participatory way the views, feedback, inputs, and corrective actions where those might be necessary within the process of documenting the BTR? And the approach we've taken in Guyana is to not embed that in every UNFCCC reporting we have to do, but embed that within the NDCs so that they become programmatic actions that are implemented, whether or not BTR season is done or BER season is done or national communication season is done, so that it outlives whichever reporting cycle that might be the flavor of the day. So what we've done in Guyana, from our Guyana-Norway bilateral cooperation agreement on climate and forest, $3 million were put into a capacity and consultation program just a few months ago for the next 3 years, $1 million for every year, to help in consultation, engagement, and participation. What we've also done is taken 15% of all sales of forest carbon credits, and we've transferred that to indigenous village bank accounts so that they could implement village level action and projects that they draft and design and determine. So it's sort of like doing what the ETF has done for us in the BTR. Give us the steer, put us in the driver's seat and say, you steer this process. So we're taking experience from that and doing that in the IP side. In terms of the questions on flexibility, so we exercise flexibility on projections. We didn't have our projections for all the sectors. And the reason for that is that we have been straddling 2 tracks over the last 6 months. We're at the cusp of finalizing our 3rd national communication, where we had embedded the projections element of the work. And that will be done by middle of July. So what we've stated in our BTR is that the projections will come at the middle of July. So we specify that the projection is a gap, but we specified when it will be submitted. And we've also exercised flexibility, and I'll probably touch on the question that you see here on the screen for me. We've also identified that the reporting tables in the specified format, which should come out sometime at the end of June, and the electronic reporting, that will also come before the review is done and in the run-up to the in-country review. And the 3rd flexibility we exercised was that we don't have a NAP. We don't have an adaptation plan, but we plan to have an adaptation plan in the future. So we've identified that as one of the gaps that we aim to fill. But perhaps of those 3 gaps, the biggest one is on projections. And we know that we were almost there. So the decision point was, do we wait until we finish, the process is completed for our 3rd national communication, which would be around July or August, and then bring that into the BTR? We decided against that. We decided to go ahead with the BTR and then to have our national communication come sometime around July, August, and to bring that in. And the main reason why we did that is we were keen on having our in-country review before the COP, so that we can complete that cycle of submission and review before the COP, so we could learn from those lessons. Really, really quickly in terms, we have a lot of in-country support for forestry and energy sectors, because we've been building this up through FCPF and UN RED and all of the forestry work we've done over the last 14 years. Not so much capacity in waste and other industrial processes and manufacturing sectors. So we did seek outside help. GGGI has been a really strong presence in Guyana, the Global Green Growth Institute, and they've been a big support for us. But we've also had consultancy help in putting together some of the tables for those other sectors. And all of this really linked to our Article 6 reporting. So we've been at the same time issuing carbon credits under the R3 standard. And we've submitted initial and annual reports under the CARP, the Centralized Accounting and Reporting Platform. And each of these almost in a way cut and pasted from the BTR, so that there is that alignment between what is being reported on the transparency side in the BTR and what Article 6.2 reporting for Guyana is looking like. Our initial report, our annual report, our authorizations, and the entire framework of submissions that are associated with Article 6.2. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we start to close the session, maybe Hihame and Christina, I don't know if you want to make any comments or reaction to what has been said up to now. Please do so. Something from you? Okay. Christina, do you want to join with some final comments from your side?
Yes, thank you, Marcelo. I think I just wanted to underline one item that was raised several times. That is that the deadline matters. It's very important. But the BTR doesn't have to be perfect yet. And I think many participants mentioned that, Guyana just mentioned that. It is important to have the cornerstones in place. It is possible to improve it over time, and we will all learn from that first experience. It's the first time for everyone, right? But don't be afraid to submit something that you may think it's not completely perfect, but it will over time. Thank you so much for including PAICC again, and back to you, Marcelo.
Thank you. As you can see, we had planned to have this Mentimeter survey. We will not have time to show to you the results, but I invite you to take the questionnaire here and put your responses. Then we can take a look later on. I would like to thank all the participants and also the Secretariat to organize this, and just highlighting some key message that from my side I think is very important. And I will start with this. Nobody will have a perfect BTR. All BTRs will trigger recommendations. And it's good that you receive recommendations, because it's part of the process that you can engage with the other experts and identify areas of improvement. So if you have 0 recommendations, something is wrong. So you should aim to have not many, but important recommendations. And therefore, we will, SCG, also will pay attention to what are the recommendations that we're going to see in the BTRs, because then we can plan how the CGE can maybe provide some kind of support. I foresee for projections is an area that we foresee a lot of recommendations or a lot of use of the flexibility provisions. So we know more or less where the things are not that good. But that's not a problem at all, and a lot of people have said that this here. So I want to again to emphasize, submit your BTR in time, knowing that it's not perfect, will not be perfect, and also welcome the recommendations that you will receive through the expert review teams. This will help you to improve even better. And I look forward to all these outcomes, because we were going to learn a lot from this exercise, and we can use whatever is going on in other countries to us also improve our own reporting. So thanks to all for your participation. I believe there is something outside for those of you that stay until the end. So I'm not sure what it is. It's a surprise, I guess. Ah, Okay, so please join us outside and we can continue to have some conversations. Thank you, everybody.